Classic Audiobooks Library presents The Door in the Wall by H.G.Wells. Chapter 1. The Confession. One confidential evening, not 3 months ago, Lionel Wallace told me this story of the door in the wall. And at the time I thought that so far as he was concerned it was a true story. He told it me with such a direct simplicity of conviction that I could not do otherwise than believe in him. But in the morning, in my own flat, I woke to a different atmosphere, and as I lay in bed and recalled the things he had told me, stripped of the glamour of his earnest slow voice, denuded of the focused shaded table light, the shadowy atmosphere that wrapped about him and the pleasant bright things, the dessert and glasses and napery of the dinner we had shared, making them for the time a bright little world quite cut off from everyday realities, I saw it all as frankly incredible. He was mystifying, I said. And then, how well he did it. It isn't quite the thing I should have expected of him, of all people, to do well. Afterwards, as I sat up in bed and sipped my morning tea, I found myself trying to account for the flavor of reality that perplexed me in his impossible reminiscences. By supposing they did in some way suggest, present, convey, I hardly know which word to use. Experiences it was otherwise impossible to tell. Well, I don't resort to that explanation now. I have got over my intervening doubts. I believe now, as I believed at the moment of telling, that Wallace did, to the very best of his ability, strip the truth of his secret for me. But whether he himself saw, or only thought he saw, whether he himself was the possessor of an inestimable privilege or the victim of a fantastic dream, I cannot pretend to guess. Even the facts of his death, which ended my doubts forever, throw no light on that. That much the reader must judge for himself. I forget now what chance comment or criticism of mine moved so reticent a man to confide in me. He was, I think, defending himself against an imputation of slackness and unreliability I had made in relation to a great public movement in which he had disappointed me. But he plunged suddenly. I have, he said, a preoccupation. I know, he went on, after a pause that he devoted to the study of his cigar ash. I have been negligent. The fact is, it isn't a case of ghosts or apparitions. But it's an odd thing to tell of Redmond. I am haunted. I am haunted by something. That rather takes the light out of things, that fills me with longings. He paused, checked by that English shyness that so often overcomes us when we would speak of moving or grave or beautiful things. You were at St. Athelstan's all through, he said. And for a moment that seemed to me quite irrelevant. Well. And he paused. Then very haltingly at first, but afterwards more easily, he began to tell of the thing that was hidden in his life. The haunting memory of a beauty and a happiness that filled his heart with insatiable longings. That made all the interests and spectacle of worldly life seem dull and tedious and vain to him. Now that I have the clue to it, the thing seems written visibly in his face. I have a photograph in which that look of detachment has been caught and intensified. It reminds me of what a woman once said of him. A woman who had loved him greatly. Suddenly, she said, the interest goes out of him. He forgets you. He doesn't care a rap for you, under his very nose. Yet the interest was not always out of him, and when he was holding his attention to a thing Wallace could contrive to be an extremely successful man. His career, indeed, is set with successes. He left me behind him long ago, he soared up over my head, and cut a figure in the world that I couldn't cut, anyhow. He was still a year short of 40. And they say now that he would have been in office and very probably in the new cabinet if he had lived. At school he always beat me without effort. As it were by nature. We were at school together at St. Athelstan's College in West Kensington for almost all our school time. He came into the school as my co-equal, but he left far above me, in a blaze of scholarships and brilliant performance. Yet I think I made a fair average running. And it was at school I heard first of the door in the wall. That I was to hear of a second time only a month before his death. To him, at least, the door in the wall was a real door, leading through a real wall to immortal realities. Of that I am now quite assured. Chapter 2. The First Encounter. And it came into his life early, when he was a little fellow between 5 and 6. I remember how, as he sat making his confession to me with a slow gravity, he reasoned and reckoned the date of it. There was, he said, a crimson Virginia creeper in it. All one bright uniform crimson in a clear amber sunshine against a white wall. That came into the impression somehow, though I don't clearly remember how, and there were horse-chestnut leaves upon the clean pavement outside the green door. They were blotched yellow and green, you know, not brown nor dirty, so that they must have been new fallen. I take it that means October. I look out for horse-chestnut leaves every year, and I ought to know. If I'm right in that, I was about 5 years and 4 months old. He was, he said, rather a precocious little boy. He learned to talk at an abnormally early age, and he was so sane and old-fashioned, as people say, that he was permitted an amount of initiative that most children scarcely attain by 7 or 8. His mother died when he was born, and he was under the less vigilant and authoritative care of a nursery governess. His father was a stern, preoccupied lawyer, who gave him little attention, and expected great things of him. For all his brightness he found life a little grey and dull, I think. And one day he wandered. He could not recall the particular neglect that enabled him to get away, nor the course he took among the West Kensington roads. All that had faded among the incurable blurs of memory. But the white wall and the green door stood out quite distinctly. As his memory of that remote childish experience ran, he did at the very first sight of that door experience a peculiar emotion, an attraction, a desire to get to the door and open it and walk in. And at the same time he had the clearest conviction that either it was unwise or it was wrong of him. He could not tell which. To yield to this attraction. He insisted upon it as a curious thing that he knew from the very beginning. Unless memory has played him the queerest trick. That the door was unfastened, and that he could go in as he chose. I seemed to see the figure of that little boy, drawn and repelled. And it was very clear in his mind, too, though why it should be so was never explained, that his father would be very angry if he went through that door. Wallace described all these moments of hesitation to me with the utmost particularity. He went right past the door, and then, with his hands in his pockets, and making an infantile attempt to whistle, strolled right along beyond the end of the wall. There he recalls a number of mean, dirty shops, and particularly that of a plumber and decorator, with a dusty disorder of earthenware pipes, sheet lead, ball taps, pattern books of wallpaper, and tins of enamel. He stood pretending to examine these things, and coveting, passionately desiring, the green door. Then, he said, he had a gust of emotion. He made a run for it, lest hesitation should grip him again. He went plump with outstretched hand through the green door and let it slam behind him. And so, in a trice, he came into the garden that has haunted all his life. It was very difficult for Wallace to give me his full sense of that garden into which he came. There was something in the very air of it that exhilarated, that gave one a sense of lightness and good happening and well-being. There was something in the sight of it that made all its colour clean and perfect and subtly luminous. In the instant of coming into it one was exquisitely glad. As only in rare moments and when one is young and joyful one can be glad in this world. And everything was beautiful there. Wallace mused before he went on telling me. You see, he said, with the doubtful inflection of a man who pauses at incredible things, there were 2 great panthers there. Yes, spotted panthers. And I was not afraid. There was a long wide path with marble-edged flower borders on either side, and these 2 huge velvety beasts were playing there with a ball. One looked up and came towards me, a little curious as it seemed. It came right up to me, rubbed its soft round ear very gently against the small hand I held out and purred. It was, I tell you, an enchanted garden. I know. And the size. Oh! It stretched far and wide, this way and that. I believe there were hills far away. Heaven knows where West Kensington had suddenly got to. And somehow it was just like coming home. You know, in the very moment the door swung to behind me, I forgot the road with its fallen chestnut leaves, its cabs and tradesmen's carts. I forgot the sort of gravitational pull back to the discipline and obedience of home. I forgot all hesitations and fear, forgot discretion, forgot all the intimate realities of this life. I became in a moment a very glad and wonder-happy little boy. In another world. It was a world with a different quality. Chapter 3. The Lost Door. World with a different quality, a warmer light, a sweeter air, a quieter joy. It is very difficult to convey the subtle charm of that place to another, and it is the more difficult because it was so simple. I can recall it in my memory as a series of bright, clean spaces set with delicate things, trees, and lawns and flowers and waters, and someone who was singing. I remember a tall, fair girl, and someone younger and smaller, talking to me and showing me things, and someone else reading, and all these people were beautiful and kind. In some way, I don't know how. It was made plain to me that they all loved me there, gladly, tenderly, and I responded with the same love. And presently I was playing delightful games in a grass-covered court, where shadows of two great trees played. It was full of the sweetest, most delightful play in the world, and I went to and fro with them, sharing, partaking, and it seemed altogether real to me. I felt no doubt of it. And presently I was being taken to see some beautiful rooms, high and simple, with uncurtained windows and wonderful pictures on the walls. And there were books, and there was a little gallery with a view across treetops and a valley, and there I was told it was the Valley of Peace. And then I remember a long gallery of white and pale blue, and then it was that we came to a door. And she, the tall, fair girl, paused. "Now, Wallace," she said, "you are going to learn." But it was not teaching in the way of schools. We went to a place with green books. They were beautiful books, and I remember there was a story about a rabbit and a squirrel, and there was wonderful music and a plant that talked. And then someone in white and gold showed me how to read, and I looked and marveled, and when I looked again I was in the garden. And still it was the same beautiful play and kindly welcome, and I was glad and happy. It scarcely occurred to me that it was day or night or that time had any passing. And then suddenly I knew that someone was calling to me. A voice was calling me by name, and it was not a voice I knew. It was a stern, insistent voice. It belonged to a real person, someone I had never heard before, and it came from the other side of the wall. And there was a moment's doubt in me. Then I knew I had to go back, though the garden was all that I could desire and more, and though my playmates were pressing me to stay. I turned and ran across the garden, through the beautiful spaces and back to the green door. As I came out of it, there was a dreadful bang and darkness, and I was on a pavement in Kensington. I was sobbing and calling for my nurse, and people were staring at me. A policeman found me and took me home. That is the story of my first visit to that enchanted garden. Since then I have been there 4 times. I remember them all clearly. I was nearly 12 when I went there again, and that time I had planned to go. I was just as certain about the place then as I am now, but I wasn't allowed to go back. That time the door was gone. I searched all along the white wall, but I could not find it. When I was 17, I saw the door again, but I was in a hurry to get to a cricket match at Lord's. It was the biggest match I had ever played in, and I passed the door without stopping. Then again, when I was 23, I saw the door in a different part of London. It was exactly the same door and wall, and it gave me the same feeling of joy and longing. But I had an appointment with someone important, and I let the door go by. That time I almost turned back. But I didn't. That is how it was. Again and again I have seen that door. 4 times. And every time I let it pass, I was pulled away by life, by responsibilities, by promises. And now, I wonder if I shall ever see it again. Chapter 4. The Final Regret. It slipped away from me. I have just missed it once again. It passed me. In a hurry. I've done that too often. Sometimes I have gone along this street or that, and I have suddenly turned and looked for it. But always it has been gone. And now, Redmond, I am older, and I am more in the world's harness, and I have never seen it again. Never. I know I shall never see it again. And Wallace bowed his head and sat for a little while, regarding the fire. And presently he looked up again with that same grave face. Sometimes, he said, I have half believed that it might be in the real world. I have half believed that, in an odd way, it lies somewhere in this grey London, nearer my door than anything else, waiting for the instant of my quest. Just by my door. He paused. It sounds, he said, like a dream, doesn't it? Like a rumour of dreams rather than a dream itself. It is as though I knew of a strange room somewhere, set with silver lights and golden flowers, the very place in which I was meant to be. Born for that place. And yet, for some reason, never able to enter. His voice dropped into silence. He sat staring into the fire, his face darkened by shadows. And then, after a long pause, he spoke again. I have been so near it, so near and so far. I've been busy. Called by duty. Forced into action. Drawn away by life's needs. Always, I told myself I would come back to it. Just wait. Not now. But I never came back. He raised his eyes. And now, he said slowly, now that I could go. Now that I have the leisure. Now that the door is shut. I waited. He seemed deep in reflection. I sometimes think, he said softly, that I have seen that garden in another world. Perhaps in dreams. Perhaps in the world beyond this. A vision of something better than this harsh life. Something that belongs to us. If only we would reach for it. There was a silence between us. Wallace leaned back in his chair, his hand to his brow. I have told you everything, he said. And that was the end of his story. Stopwatch #1000. Chapter 5, Death and Wonder. That, I think, was the most I ever heard him tell of the matter. It was soon after that talk that I saw Wallace for the last time. He told me then that he was writing a memorandum on the matter. To keep the thing in check, he said, lest it should spoil his life. He showed me the little notebook in which he was writing. It was plain that he still believed, very strongly, in the reality of the garden he had once entered. And still believed that it had indeed opened no less than 4 times to him. He believed that there was an enchanted garden somewhere, hidden in this very world, under the disguise of common things, and that if only he knew the right moment to pass the right wall, the door would open again. But he doubted now if he would ever find it again. Time and circumstances, he thought, had closed it against him. And then, it happened. He was found dead early in the morning. In a deep excavation pit for a new railway near Camden Hill. The night was foggy, and there had been a light snowfall. No one had seen him leave his flat, and no one knew why he was in that part of London. There were no signs of foul play. It seemed simply that he had fallen in. That is the way Wallace ended. Was it an accident? Or did he, in those last hours, see the door once more? Did he follow it through? Even to the end? Did he at last pass out of this grey world into the garden? The lost garden of his boyhood? The place of quiet happiness and wonder? I do not know. I only know that I believe his story. And sometimes, I find myself searching the white walls of London, for a green door that may open for me. This concludes the end of the story. Thank you for listening to Classic Audiobooks Library. To hear more free stories like this, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We hope you'll join us again for more timeless stories and original works. Until next time.